Hi, Penny Lane here, and I have a fairly controversial confession to make. I love both QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. Today, I'm not going to be advocating for one or the other, but rather help you understand the key differences between QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop when it comes to construction accounting and job costing. For those of you who don't know me well, I've been passionate about helping bookkeepers, contractors, and those who find themselves as bookkeepers for contractors get the reports and numbers they need out of QuickBooks to make smart decisions about their business. I've been a certified QuickBooks Pro Advisor since 2005. I work one-on-one with construction businesses every day and have for over a decade, with one-on-one training and support, outsourced CFO services, and my video training for both QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop, which you can find at my website, jobcosting.com. In the recent past, most of my work has focused around QuickBooks Desktop because QuickBooks Online really didn't have the features that most contractors need in their accounting system. But last year, there were some key features that have made QuickBooks Online a possibility for more construction and project-based businesses. In today's lesson, I'm going to go over some of those differences. And while QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online were both created by Intuit and they both have the same purpose to do our accounting, they have a very different interface and functionality. I know one of the things that I still struggle with, and a lot of my clients struggle with is, which is the best choice for me or my client, QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop? It's a question that doesn't always have a really straight answer, even after I give you all of this information, but information is power, and this should help you make a very informed decision. At this time, I'll just say right up front that QuickBooks Desktop is definitely the winner for functionality. But the thing is, what if you don't need that functionality? What is it that you would be missing or compromising? And there are some really specific things that can help you make the best decision. Job costing in QuickBooks Online, I still think is pretty much a work in progress, but it's reached a point that it's pretty viable and even a great solution for a lot of contractors. In this presentation, I'm just going to go do a brief overview of the major differences between QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop when it comes to job costing and construction accounting. In the interest of time, I'm going to highlight the most important aspects in which they differ, so you can be as educated as possible when recommending one or the other to your clients or making an educated decision for your business. The main differences I'm going to be talking about are the project's dashboard, the estimates versus actual reports, and the role of items, the job costing of labor, which is a major, big one, and also a little bit about cloud-based access and third-party programs. So let's go ahead and just dig right in. Let's talk for just a minute about the project's dashboard in QuickBooks Online. I'm going to touch on this very briefly, but I wanted to let you know that QuickBooks Online has a really cool dashboard feature for projects that QuickBooks Desktop just doesn't have. I won't dig into it much, but there's a dashboard of all projects when you have the projects feature turned on. And then when you click onto one, you'll open up a dashboard just for that project. This is the dashboard for the individual project, where you have almost everything in one place for your project, your transactions, your time costs, and most of your project reports. I go into this in a lot more detail in my job costing in QuickBooks Online using projects video training course. So that's all I'm going to say about this right now, but it is a pretty cool feature and you can only find this in QuickBooks Online. Now let's talk about QuickBooks Online versus QuickBooks Desktop, the job cost reports, and the role that items play in your accounting system and your job cost reports. In QuickBooks Desktop, the key job costing reports, like the job estimates versus actual detail and the job profitability detail, are item-based. This allows you to set up your cost codes as items in QuickBooks and keep the cost of goods sold accounts very simple. So your items are going to look something like this. They're going to represent your cost codes. Of course, it's going to be much longer. Most people have anywhere between 10 and hundreds of items on their item list that represent their cost codes or the different phases of work. While your cost of goods sold accounts, usually just a few accounts like labor, materials, subcontractor. In QuickBooks Desktop, you're going to enter all your job-related costs to items instead of directly to your accounts like you're used to. And your estimates versus actual detail report is going to look something like this, where you can see your estimated cost by cost code in one column compared to the actual costs as you record them, and then the difference by cost code. You also have a column for the estimated revenue and the actual revenue by cost code and the difference there. Now, not every contractor fits into the estimate versus actual revenue. Not every contractor needs that type of reporting, but when you do, it's a really nice, cool feature to be able to see your estimated versus actual revenue broken down by cost code. So that's like if you do line item invoicing for your clients, this feature can really help you see where you're at. Then there's the job profitability detail report. This one is simpler. It just shows your actual cost and your actual revenue broken down by cost code. So there's no estimates involved, but this is a really great report to see how you're doing. And not every business uses estimates or needs budget versus actual or estimates versus actual reports. And again, this is completely item-based. In QuickBooks Online, items really play a much smaller role. In QuickBooks Online, items are called products and services. And in most cases, there really isn't any point in going to the trouble of entering your costs to the item or to the product and service. There are some exceptions, which of course I go into more in my video training, but the job profitability report and the job budgets versus actuals report, which is the closest that we can get to an estimates versus actuals like you have in desktop, are based on cost of goods sold account. So they're account based, not item/product and service based. In QuickBooks Online, items are used for estimates and invoicing. You can use the items to record the costs if you have them mapped correctly, but you can't choose them when entering transactions from the bank feeds. So it's just a lot of data entry, which doesn't have a lot of benefit to you in most cases. Again, there are some exceptions that I go over in my video training, but in most cases, items, products, and services are really not a big job costing deal. They're just used for creating estimates, invoices, and purchase orders if you use those. Depending on how you invoice your clients, your item list may also represent your cost code. So if you do line item invoicing, you might also set up your item list to look just like your cost of goods sold account. So that's going to be all of your cost codes broken down. Or it may just be an item or two. If you do lump sum invoicing, you could just have something like construction draw, or if you have a particular draw schedule that you use, those would be the items that you would set up. Just whatever you would need for invoicing, whatever you need for estimates, or whatever you need for purchase orders. Your job cost reports are a little bit different. The main job cost report in QuickBooks Online and from the project's dashboard is basically a profit and loss for the job. So you see you've got your total revenue. That's just on one line item, not usually broken down by cost code because we don't have columns like we do in desktop. And then you've got your cost of goods sold broken down by cost of goods sold account, and those represent your cost codes. To create estimates versus actual type reports, or a lot of people do call them budgets versus actual reports, in addition to putting in your estimate if you need to for invoicing, or you can skip the estimate altogether if you're not doing progress invoicing or sending customers proposals, because to get the estimate or budget versus actuals, you'll also need to create a budget with cost code level estimated cost detail in QuickBooks Online. So it's a different step. You have to also go and create a budget in QuickBooks Online to get this report. And it requires some customizing. Again, I go over that in a lot of detail in my video training. But essentially, you're going to be able to see your total revenue broken down by income account, which is not going to be usually as elaborate as your estimated costs. And then you can put in your estimated or your budget for your different cost codes. And as you enter your costs and put them towards this project, you will be able to get a budgeted amount for that cost code and an actual amount for that cost code. So here's just the two reports side by side so you can kind of see what that looks like. We've got our income budget versus actual report on the left for QuickBooks Online, and then the item-based estimates versus actuals detail from QuickBooks Desktop, where we have columns. I also want to let you know that there are a few reports that can be really important to contractors that you're just not going to find in QuickBooks Online. I'm not going to go into a super lot of detail because it's a bit overwhelming, but if you're familiar with these reports in desktop and or you do under billing WIP adjustments, you might really miss the estimates versus actual summary report, the job WIP report, which you can get in Enterprise, and the unpaid bills by job report. I mean, there are others, but these are the main reports that you will find in QuickBooks Premier Contractor that you will not find in QuickBooks Online. In summary, job costing in QuickBooks Desktop is item-based, and in addition to what I've showed you here, has much more extensive reporting and seamless reporting capabilities for job costing. But QuickBooks Online has really cool projects dashboard and project center, and you can avoid a lot of data entry by using the bank feeds to import transactions if you aren't using the items to record costs in QuickBooks Online. In QuickBooks Desktop, if you're doing job costing, everything has to be entered to the item level, which is not available in the bank feeds in either QuickBooks Online or Desktop. So whether you're in Online or Desktop, if you need to use the items to record the costs, you're going to be doing more data entry. But if you just use QuickBooks Online for your project costing, in most cases, you're not going to need to use the products and services, so you can use the bank feeds, which saves a ton of time on data entry. Next, I'm going to talk about your job costing of your project or job-related labor. This would be labor that you pay on payroll usually. And this is usually the deciding factor of whether or not going into QuickBooks Online is the best choice for a contractor if you have payroll. I'm not going to go through all the details of setting up and using these functions, but I'm going to go into enough detail that you understand what's involved because it's really important. QuickBooks Desktop does an amazing job of allocating your labor, including burden, to jobs just by running payroll. And when I say burden, I mean workers' comp, payroll, taxes, benefits, the whole shebang. Using an outside payroll service is pretty much the same process with just a couple of additional steps. Basically, once the timesheet is in QuickBooks to the job and the cost code, all you have to do is run the payroll. When you're running payroll in QuickBooks Desktop, it will automatically pull from the timesheets and completely populate the paycheck with all of the information needed to get fully burdened job costing. It really only takes a few minutes, no matter how many employees you have. In QuickBooks Online, it's a totally different situation, and I would like to present you with 3 different options: the process payroll in QuickBooks Online using QuickBooks Online Payroll, the time cost method, and the journal entry method, which is of my own creation. First, I'm going to talk about processing payroll using QuickBooks Online Payroll. This is really good mostly for, I'd say, specialty contractors, electricians, plumbing, things like that. The gross payroll and payroll taxes are the only costs that are captured, no other burden like workers' comp, which can be a really big deal and is really challenging to allocate in some other way. The payroll costs are captured in one account only. You will not be able to break down the payroll costs into different cost codes for estimates versus actual reporting of labor. You'll understand this a little better in a few minutes when I show you what I mean. You also must have the time entered on the timesheets prior to creating the payroll. You can't open the paycheck to review or edit the job costing. It's just happening in the background and you just have to count on it. This is what it looks like on your job profitability report. So you're going to see it payroll taxes, wages, under payroll expenses, but you will not see it broken down by framing, plumbing, electrical, etc. Even if you use those service items on the timesheets, of course, I highly recommend using TSheets, but if you use those onto the timesheets, it still is not going to break them down that way. It just doesn't have the capability. If you don't need your payroll broken down by cost code and it works for you to include the additional burden into your markup and overhead, if like your workers' comp, then this is a really great solution. Let's talk just a minute about the time cost method. I mostly hate this one. This method leverages a burden rate. It's super easy to use. I love that part, but the labor costs don't show up on any reports. This is a non-posting transaction. You will see the labor costs in one place only, and that is on the project's dashboard. So if I went and ran a job profitability report for this, that labor would not show up, which to me is just most of the time not acceptable. But the positive about it is that it's extremely easy to set up and extremely easy to use. You will need to put the time into QuickBooks Online, again, preferably using TSheets in some manner in order to see it. Next, I'm going to share with you what I'm calling the journal entry method. This is best utilized when you have an outside payroll service. If you do use QuickBooks Online Payroll, you have to be really careful because you won't be able to import the time, or the labor costs are going to be duplicated on your job cost reports. I think that this is the best method for capturing job labor, including burden, by cost code. And when you do this method, I'm showing you with TSheets. I highly recommend that you use TSheets for all of these methods for that matter, but particularly for this. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip a lot of details, but I do have a very extensive video in my QuickBooks Online Projects video training that would show you how to set all this up. First thing you're going to do is have your employees enter their time into TSheets, assigning their time to the project and the cost code. The cost code are going to be the product and service items in QuickBooks Online, in which case you want to make sure that you have your products and services set up in QuickBooks Online and synced with TSheets that represent your cost code or how you want to see your labor broken down. Then in TSheets, you're going to run the worker job cost report and download it as a CSV or Excel file. Then you're going to create a pivot table to group the total labor costs by job and cost code. Then you're going to create a journal entry in QuickBooks Online broken down by project and cost code. It does not need to be broken down by employee. So it doesn't really matter how many employees you have in regard to how long or how extensive this entry is going to be. It really matters how many different projects you go to and how many different service items are involved in any given period, as far as how many line items are going to be on your journal entry, because that's what we want to know. How long is it going to take me to do this journal entry? You'll be debiting the cost of goods sold account for each one of your cost codes, and then you're going to use an item that I have under payroll expenses called job labor offset. Again, a lot more details in my training, but this is essentially what your journal entry will look like, with one line for each cost code and project. Your head might be spinning a bit. It's a lot. I know, especially when I say things like pivot tables, but the job costing of labor is way more work in QuickBooks Online than desktop if you need it broken down by cost code. But it's not necessarily a deal breaker. Regardless of how many employees you have, if you're only working on a couple of different jobs, a couple of different cost codes each pay period or period that you want to do this entry, it's not as complex or time consuming as it looks. If you're working on a lot of different jobs in any given week, or a lot of different cost codes in any given period, it could be a very long journal entry, but even then, it works. This is best for contractors who need their labor broken down by cost code, including burden. It's more work in QuickBooks Online than in QuickBooks Desktop, no matter what you do. This is going to be prohibitive if you work on a lot of different jobs or a lot of different service items in any period. But the number of employees is not a big issue if you're using TSheets. If you don't want to use TSheets, you won't be able to get that cool report, but it's something that you could probably create on your own in Excel. I just have not done that because TSheets is worth it. I'd like to touch a little bit on cloud-based access, because a lot of people want to use QuickBooks Online simply because they want that kind of cloud-based access. But you can have cloud-based access with desktop as well. QuickBooks Online is, of course, natively web-based. It also comes with one subscription price with 5 simultaneous users plus 2 accountant users. The advanced version comes with 25 users plus 3 accountant users. And Essentials doesn't support projects at all, so you're probably not going to want to use Essentials. You can access QuickBooks Online either just directly through your web browser or through the desktop app. With QuickBooks Desktop, it's based on your hard drive, so that is going to require some additional software in order to get you into a cloud-based situation. One of them, and the most economical, is called QBox by CoralTree, and you'll see some links down in the notes of how to get a hold of them. They are the most economical. It does not work well for simultaneous users, you can work offline, but it will lock the file, although users can share access. So you can't both be using it at the same time. It essentially acts kind of like Dropbox for QuickBooks files. Don't ever use Dropbox or Google Drive to host your QuickBooks data file, by the way. But it's only, like right now, I think it's $12 a month per user. So it's a really easy way to access your data file remotely from any computer, or to share data files like between one person who is the contractor looking at reports and maybe creating estimates and invoices, and your bookkeeper that might be in a different location. It's a perfect solution for that, as long as you're not both going to be using it at the same time. There's also hosting. This is great for simultaneous multi-user access. QuickBooks is accessed via remote desktop. It does require a QuickBooks license and a hosting fee for each user, and you have to have live internet access while you're using it. However, keep in mind that QuickBooks Desktop does not charge you for additional company files, whereas QuickBooks Online does. So if you had like 5 different companies, you're going to get more economy oftentimes out of desktop than you would with QuickBooks Online, depending on what you've got going on. You can also use like TeamViewer or something similar, but I don't care for those, because in those cases you're actually taking over the computer on the other end, and you have to have things in place and nobody else can be on the computer and things like that. So I really prefer either QBox or hosting for remote access to QuickBooks Desktop. Now let's talk about third-party software integrations. You're going to want to use a third-party software with QuickBooks Online if you want a more robust job cost scenario than what's available to you with QuickBooks Online and the projects feature itself. If you have a large number of projects with cost code level labor job costing, as we discussed, it could be really prohibitive to get the labor into QuickBooks on projects by itself, and so you might want to use a third-party program for your job costing. You might also want to add it if you want project management features like scheduling, takeoff estimating, contract management, vendor and client communications, AIA invoice generation, all sorts of things. So a lot of third-party software like Notify and Buildertrend and CoConstruct, not only do they handle your job costing, but they also have a lot of other great features that you might be interested in. I do want to let you know, and this is just currently, so it may have changed by the time you're watching this, that the only third-party app I'm aware of that integrates with the projects feature in QuickBooks Online is TSheets. This just means that in most cases, the third-party software will be handling all of the job costing, and QuickBooks Online will just be handling the accounting part. So you won't be using the projects feature in QuickBooks Online at all. The third-party software does all the heavy lifting of the job costing, including the labor and everything. But that also means that all of your costs have to be entered directly into the third-party system, and then they're sent over to QuickBooks Online, usually as bills, not the labor, but other job-related costs. This usually means a lot more data entry than using QuickBooks Online on your own. It depends on, of course, what system you choose, but for the most part, if that third-party system is doing the job costing, you're going to have to manually data entry costs into that program. With some software like Notify, you can actually enter the transactions directly in QuickBooks Online, but they always leverage the products and services. So you will have to enter them using the product and services, which means you're not going to be using the bank feeds. I just really want people to get clear about whether or not you can or cannot use the bank feeds, because it's kind of a big deal with QuickBooks Online. That's one of the attractive features about it, is the bank feeds feature and how practical it is, but it doesn't allow for item-based entry at this time in either QuickBooks Online or Desktop. With QuickBooks Desktop, you can also add these third-party project management apps. It's not necessary for the job costing portion, although it's kind of nice. QuickBooks Desktop does a great job of job costing on its own, and the third-party software is usually just for things like timekeeping, like TSheets, receipt management for like Expensify, and or project management, contracts, things like that. Most transactions are entered directly into QuickBooks Desktop in these cases for the job-related costs, and then they're imported into the third party for the job costing report. So you'll have these job costing reports both in QuickBooks Desktop as well as outside. So the accountant can do what they need to do with them, like WIP adjustments, And then the contractor can also see them in the third-party software without having to interact with QuickBooks. With QuickBooks Desktop, integration of third-party apps is not as tight. Usually it requires an import-export type prompt, whereas with QuickBooks Online, third-party app integrations are very tight and they don't usually require any intervention. They'll often just auto-sync. Some of the popular third-party apps we have for QuickBooks Online, Jobber, or Intuit Field Service Manager for service-based businesses like plumbers out running around or HVAC. For project management, Notify, Buildertrend, or Co-Construct are all very popular apps that work with QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. For timekeeping, I'm a huge fan of TSheets. Also, ClockShark, Timesheets.com, and ExactTime are really popular timekeeping apps that work with QuickBooks Online as well as QuickBooks Desktop. And for expense receipt management in QuickBooks Online, Tally, Expensify, Receipt Bank, and HubDoc are all really popular. Of course, QuickBooks Online has its own receipt management feature inside, but it's not very robust. Keep in mind that for the desktop, only Expensify and Tally, as far as I know, currently work with QuickBooks Desktop, whereas QuickBooks Online, you have more options. In QuickBooks Desktop for the project management, there's also a really great one called UDA Construction Suite, which has been around a very long time and is a super popular project management app. And for service businesses, for QuickBooks Desktop, Intuit Field Service Manager, Corrigo, or Service Titan are really popular apps to use with QuickBooks Desktop. In summary, in my opinion, QuickBooks Online is best for specialty contractors and speculative builders who don't need cost code level labor job costing. For general contractors who don't need cost code level labor job costing or have a small, reasonable number of jobs and payroll related service items in any given payroll period, and they're up for my journal entry method. Contractors of all kinds who want tightly integrated cloud-based job costing and project management software and are up for managing that integration are also a really good fit for QuickBooks Online. And I do want to emphasize a little bit the managing of the integration, because that is definitely a thing. If you've got a third-party software connected to QuickBooks Online, and those are going to be integrated, so you're going to be using QuickBooks, the third-party software for job costing and QuickBooks Online for accounting, there is an integration that needs to be set up and it needs to be managed, and sometimes it's kind of a pain. QuickBooks Desktop, I'd say, in my opinion, is best for contractors of all types who want solid, detailed, cost code level job costing, including cost code level labor job costing, right out of their accounting system or without the third-party project management app. Definitely contractors who have union or prevailing wage payroll and don't want to outsource it. You are not going to want to even attempt that in QuickBooks Online. I haven't dug into it much, but just know. And contractors who don't want or need project management app, or they just want the reports that are available in QuickBooks Desktop that are not available in QuickBooks Online, those contractors are a good fit for QuickBooks Desktop. Clear as mud? I know it's a lot of information, but just know that I can help. I have on-demand extensive video training for QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online. This is on-demand, short, subject-based videos. I also do one-on-one remote screen sharing, support, and training. I work on bigger projects as well with cleanup and setup of your systems. I've got a free job costing videos for QuickBooks Desktop. I've also got a Facebook group for construction accountants called Construction Accountants and Bookkeepers Learn, Share, and Grow with Penny Lane. I highly encourage you to join. You can also always email me at penny@jobcosting.com. I always love to hear from you. I hope you found this helpful, and if you have, by all means, please share it on social media. Share it with your friends and colleagues and those who you think might be interested. I really appreciate your support.